Welcome to Wednesdays with Whitney, and I am here today with Catalina, who is a licensed therapist. We are live. Hi, we are live. We are live Wednesdays with Whitney. I'm Whitney, of course, and today I am with Catalina, who is a licensed therapist, and we are going to talk today about the concept of collective trauma. But before we get into that rather heavy topic, I'm going to let Catalina introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the world.
Okay, thank you for having me. So I'm Catalina, a KRD wrestler. I am a licensed psychologist here in Des Moines. I have a small private practice in West Des Moines. It's called the West Des Moines Center for Psychotherapy. And I also do a little bit of consulting on the side. I am certified Dare to Lead and Daring Way facilitator with the work of Brené Brown. And so I spend also part of my time doing some consulting and running groups to facilitate that work.
Love it. So you come to us with a breadth of knowledge, not just from the therapeutic side of things, but from the leadership world. So what I really want to dive into right now is this. First of all, can we define trauma?
Sure.
Just so we have a base level to work with for everybody.
Yeah, to not get into too much of the psychology lingo, I would say that we think of trauma usually as an experience where people have intense, frightening experience combined with some feeling of trappedness, feeling entrapped, or feeling overcome by something. And when those two things combine, obviously our system goes into fight or flight, and when it can't fight or flight, escape or fight whatever is taking place, it can actually go into what we call freeze. And so trauma, sometimes we think about it in stereotypical ways as shock trauma, which is an accident, people going to war, something big, significant that has happened. But sometimes trauma can also be things that haven't happened. And that's the hardest trauma to identify.
So things that haven't happened.
Yeah.
Things that we expected, but they didn't happen.
Correct.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
So think about things like someone who is worried about getting food for an extended period of time. Think about people who are worried about being able to keep their housing. Think about kiddos who are neglected. It's things that didn't happen to them. It's not what actually happened, but what didn't happen, the things that they didn't receive. And so if you translate that to what is taking place today, a lot of what is happening is actually things that are not happening.
Oh my gosh. Which is so hard to unpack, because a lot of times when we are trying to explain ourselves or talk about why something is, we go to the event. But I think right now there's this idea of collective trauma that I want to get to, but personally what I've experienced is just this, like, I don't know. I just don't know.
Yes.
And every step I take could be a step in the wrong direction. And I just have to trust that it isn't. I don't, and so can we talk about what that, because I think that is a common, that's almost universal right now, with whatever situation you're in. Our sense of normalcy, our sense of like what tomorrow's going to be is not guaranteed. It never was.
Correct.
But we just now know that. So tell me what that means in terms of collective trauma.
Yeah, so so a couple things about what you just said, Whitney, that I think is important. So there are things that are actually happening right now, right? We have this pandemic. We have a civil rights movement. We also have the detention that is happening at the border. We have things that we're constantly being exposed to. And so we can say, yes, there are things that are happening right now. But we also know that in the context of those things happening, there are a lot of fears, like you said, of what we're sitting on, right? We're sitting in a lot of uncertainty. And a lot of people that I talk to, my clients, what they bring into the office is often that. It's just like, we thought this was going to come to an end. We were just preparing for a short period of time. and we kind of rallied around that. And now that we're kind of settling into this idea that this is not going to pass anytime soon, people are starting to feel like they're waiting in uncertainty. And that uncertainty of not knowing, you know, am I gonna have enough to eat for the long run? Is my job safe? Am I gonna be able to keep my housing? All sorts of things start to have an impact not just on the individual, but collectively, right? And in groups as a whole. In the past, when we talk about collective trauma, we might think of natural disasters, right? There's a hurricane, or there's a tornado that hits a whole community, and there is a collective sense of feelings that that community will experience, and also a collective way in which the community will come out of that, how they will adapt to it. We're in a gigantic collective trauma.
I mean, like, I just can't, and I think this has been said, there's never been a time really where everyone has been affected by the same thing.
Yes.
And in a sense, I don't know exactly how to say this, but it's not an equalizer, because like everyone, there are people having much worse experiences, and there are people that aren't affected. But for the first time, we are all coming into contact. Countries, people, demographics are all coming into contact with the same exact thing. So we're all going to experience this differently. We're all going to experience the pandemic differently. We're all going to experience the social justice movement differently. How, as individuals, can we show up in uncertainty? And I know that's a huge question, so
Yes.
I don't expect that we're going to answer that in the next 10 minutes, but maybe just what do we think through? Or, I don't know, I'll let you run with that.
Yeah.
With that big, I'll just take a step back. And
with these big
Yes,
questions.
here, enjoy.
No, that's a great question. And, I think there are many things we can do. I would say that perhaps the most important thing that we can do in this moment is to continue to bring ourselves to the here and now. Like, we have to concentrate on what we can do today. One, to take care of ourselves. Two, to be aware of what is happening and noticing without panic. All of our systems are activated right now constantly. We're receiving a ton of information. It's all important. We have to stay informed. It's important that we participate. And yet, if we start to think about that too far into the future, even a week from now, because everything is changing here daily, I think we would enter into probably something that feels very scary and make that uncertainty even larger. So part of the key elements of staying, persevering, staying resilient is really about concentrating on that here and now.
I mean, that being present. I mean, I think the biggest realization I had during quarantine was I wasn't experiencing any new issues in my life. Like, the issues that came up for me, the things I was struggling with, were the things I had always been struggling with. They were I just had time, and they were the first things I was scared about.
Yeah.
And it was this, like, moment in my gut that I was like, oh my gosh, I have been ignoring this because I can be busy, and now I can't.
You can't.
And the presence that quarantine brought a lot of us of like, I kind of just have to think about today and security today, because tomorrow's not guaranteed. But how do a lot of it for me personally was, I've been like, I love living in the moment. What does the future look like?
Yes.
Like, how do I secure the moment? And I think that idea of security and trauma, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but I think all of our security's been shaken. Just that we can't pretend anymore. We can't pretend that everything's going to be okay. because we live in America, because whatever our because is, because we have a house, because we have a job.
Correct.
Like now we all know that that's not real.
Correct. Correct.
Can you respond to that? Because I feel like I'm still in my thought.
Well, you're making a really important connection. You're connecting trauma to our sense of safety and security, and that is at the core of what gets severed when we experience trauma. When we experience trauma, what happens? We become hypervigilant. We become a little more paranoid. We start to feel like we can't trust others. We start to hoard resources because we don't know if we're going to have them later. So you're absolutely right that our sense of safety is intimately, it's being tapped into even if we have resources. You know, I think of myself as, you know, blessed in that, you know, I have a family and we haven't lost our jobs. We have been able to keep working. We have been able to keep our income. And yet, you know, I'm in the midst of making decisions about my kids, whether they're going to go back to school or not, which, you know, it feels like a ginormous decision. And of course, a shared decision that I'm, you know, that I'm going through making this decision with every other mom in the world in this moment. And we talk about it, but we feel the weight of that. And even in that, there's a lot sense of, are we safe no matter what decision we make, right? And so, you know, we all experience this, whether we have been, you know, touched in significant or insignificant ways. We all find, you know, in our own story, it's likely that we're encountering ways in which we're feeling that lack of safety, like you just talked about. So yes, that's precisely it. And think about it. If we think about too far down the road, it's just going to be too scary, right? So
it's too big.
Correct. It's too big.
And it's so, for someone that's a dreamer and, you know, I love big projects and I love big goals. It really, I found that it released me. I was just like, okay, cool. But then, you know, once we kind of got back to work, I clicked right back in and I was like, but wait, I know my lesson. I know that this could get shut off at any time. So I think there's this balance of, for me, you know, when all of this happened, I looked to trust and not trust in a system, because unfortunately our systems are what has come under fire here. our collective systems are not working out great.
Correct. So, we can say that.
Yeah, they're not working out great. So, and that's actually not funny, but in this, in the context of my realization, it is. But when I talk about trust, I really settled into, I know that if I continue showing up for myself and for others, and like trust in the big word, like trust in the universe, trust in energy, like just showing up for that I will be taken care of. And that was the only place that I could find a space to make decisions from.
Correct.
And I'm like, but like that, whoa.
Well, the thing is, yes, you know, right now it's hard for us to trust systems. It's hard for us to trust certain people. It's hard for us to trust, you know, at times our leaders. So it's hard to find trust in this moment. And so what we have to rely on, and the reason why it's so important to come back to that here and now, is because the one thing we can trust is ourselves, right? And so the resiliency is going to come from our ability to sit with ourselves through this time and do what is needed for ourselves and for those immediate to us. You know, whether it's our small community or, you know, a little bigger community, but to those immediate to us, to do the best we can. And, you know, that also requires a set of skills or a set of knowledge that we have to cultivate. So once we're in that here and now, we have to learn to cultivate a whole lot more empathy.
For ourselves, because if you don't have it for yourself, you can't have it for anybody else.
Correct.
And then everybody else, I mean, that empathy piece is, is everything, because we can't like I can't continue like that judgment. Just like I was like, it became really easy for me to release judgment in this time period, because I'm just like, you're all just doing what you need to do. And even if it doesn't feel like that to me, like even if it doesn't feel good to me, I had to know that everyone is, and maybe it's naive to think that everybody's trying their best, but everyone's trying to survive.
Oh, it's not naive. I think it's critical. It's critical for us to believe that right now everyone is doing the very best they can under their circumstances. It's the only way to empathy. And I think empathy is the other really important piece that is missing right now in so many places. We're angry, we're divided, people are hurting, people are scared. And you know, this practice of empathy is the only thing, the only other thing that I see as another really important component of resilience to get through this period.
So, if this is the piece, where do we find it?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a complex question as well, because empathy comes from inside, but there are steps to growing it. There are steps to recognize where, like, I knew that I had spots where I had a lot of empathy, and then spots that I didn't. But if I don't have it everywhere, I don't have it anywhere. And so for me, I'm a big, like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Wow. So I just say that to myself. Anytime I catch myself, I'm like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Yes. Okay. And sometimes that's awesome, and sometimes that's not. But that empathy piece, can you, to anybody watching who might want to tap into that a little bit more, work on that more, where can we go? What are our resources?
Sure. I would say that, like anything else that we try to practice, it starts with knowledge. We have to understand the concept, and people think, I know what that is, I don't need to look that up. I really encourage you to look at it, really examine what that is. This is a culture where we cultivate a ginormous amount of competition. And it starts with the 40-year-old sports, and it goes throughout lifetime. We compete all the time, and competition really is opposite to empathy. And so I really believe that if you think that you know what it is, I again encourage you to start by looking it up. And of course, the work of Dr. Brené Brown has been, I'm a fan, I facilitate the work, but I would say that she has done the best work that I know out there in defining the term and giving us the skills to understand the importance of it in our relationships, in our lives, and the importance of it in resiliency. And that's what we're all looking for. We're looking for that. And so I would start there. Any of her books. There's a wonderful short little animated video also on YouTube of empathy versus sympathy, and the difference between those two, which are quite different. One drives disconnection and the other one drives connection. And we're looking for that empathy, which is the one that drives connection. And it's what we're needing.
Love it. Well, I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up. Catalina, thank you so much for coming on and tackling this rather large topic today. And please feel free to drop some questions in the comments. I'm sure Catalina will jump in and answer. And I will be back with you guys next week. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do in this community.
So